Welcome to the Freedom Founder Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Duggar. Now, I want to thank you for joining me today, John McLaughlin. Today, I'm excited to have a conversation about bootstrapping over a period of time and really the determination, the key ingredient to success as you work and progress forward as an entrepreneur. So, John, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure, Zach. Thanks for having me. I listened to your show. I've learned a lot. You've got great guests, so it's an honor and a privilege to be one of them.
Well, I appreciate that, John.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I like to start the show just talking a little bit about the front end of your entrepreneurial journey and what that looked like for you. And even if you think back, I know sometimes I talked to somebody not too long ago, and she said, "Yeah, I used to have a lemonade stand, and that kind of got me going." Or I sold flowers for my mom, and that really just kind of started that part of that journey. Or this gentleman told me his dad made him get out and mow lawns, and that got him going. And eventually, he started a lawn care business and a landscaping business. So we all have different stories. So where would you say kind of your foundation started as an entrepreneur?
It's an interesting story, actually. I'm not the entrepreneurial type because
Mhm.
I'm kind of risk averse, and I
Yeah.
always thought that starting something was an extremely risky thing to do. Because the failure rate is so high. If you just look at the
Mhm.
numbers, you realize, wow, 50% don't make it their first year or whatever. But it just so happened that my dad spent 25 years of his life from high school till he was in his 50s. So maybe a little more than 50. Started out working in a factory, never went to college. And he worked his way up to national sales manager for the same company, invested, countless hours. These are all his friends. He built this business up for other people.
Mhm.
And it got to be in his mid 50s. And one day they just said, we don't need you anymore. As happens to a lot of people, you start building up the big
Right.
benefits and they got new ownership and all his friends were gone. And then he was gone. And he said, well, from that day forward, I will never work for anybody but myself again. And he never did.
Yep.
It just so happened I was finishing up college. I was going to get a business degree and go work for a nice big bank or somewhere that I thought like they would take care of me for the rest of my life. And he came up to me and he said, he had just started his business maybe a year before. How would you like to come work for me? He said, we don't have any money, but I can buy you a company car and I can teach you a lot. And it was in the same industry he'd been in his whole life. And I told him, I said, man, you're working out of the dining room here. We got a filing cabinet and a telephone and a desk. I mean, that's all we got. And I'm young. I mean, I hate to waste 2 and 3 years investing in this startup and watch it go south. And then what? I'm behind all the guys that are getting out of
Mhm.
school with me, but I knew I could learn a lot. He spent his whole lifetime in the industry and he was very good at what he did, obviously. And so I said, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'll give you 2 years. And then after that, I got to go find someplace that's a lot safer. Um,
Mhm.
he never discouraged me. He said, okay, we'll do it for 2 years and we'll see where we're at. But he let me learn what he learned the hard way. The real risk in all this is putting your fate in someone else's hands, right? I mean, going to work for that big bank looks safe until the day comes when it just happened to my wife. But you get the pop-up screen that says, prepare for your exit interview. We don't need you here
Mhm.
anymore. And you're invested heavily in this. These are your friends. These are, everything you've worked for
Yeah.
the past 2 years is just one day gone.
Mhm.
So that company, that was 1987. When I said I would work for him for 2 years, I own that company, still work for that company today, 30 something years later. It went from the dining room to a 10,000 square foot warehouse that it owns. I've got 7 employees
Mhm.
now. We got 2 trucks. The growth of that has been much greater than I could have ever imagined. But not to say there weren't some bad times too.
Yeah.
There was 2 or 3 times when I didn't think we were going to make it. And I bought in a business broker and said, help me get out of this before this whole thing falls apart. So
Mhm.
I'm a very unlikely entrepreneur, I guess you'd say. But what I did learn was that it's where you want to be. If it's where you want to be, if you want a secure future, because you can control
Yeah, yeah, I
it.
think that was a good point that early on you identified as risk averse and not really the entrepreneurial type. And that when you made that commitment to your father, it was stepping outside your comfort zone, but it also had a defined timeline.
Right.
And yet that timeline got extended because you kept on moving forward with the business and now own the business today and have seen tremendous growth and experienced that sense of security in your own, operating under your own auspices, your own fate, running it yourself. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when things go south, it's up to you to fix them and make everything right, but you can do it.
Yeah.
When you're small, you can pivot. It's easy to make change in directions and to find a way to make a bad situation better, but if you're working for somebody else, you do what they tell you. You don't have any
Yeah.
freedom to make that decision. So you really are putting your eggs in somebody else's basket, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
and I do try to encourage people who are a little skeptical, maybe a little timid, to say, all right, I want to start my own business, do my own thing, but they're a little afraid that they're taking a big risk. You're really not.
Yeah.
You might not make it the first time. You might not make it the second time, but you learn from those experiences. Take what you've learned, what you did right, what you did wrong, reformulate a plan, which is what we did. We failed one time
Mhm.
right out of the gate. That company really lasted 3 or 4 years because we didn't do the bookkeeping correctly, and we got audited,
Okay.
and we didn't have any way to make the numbers match up. And
Yep.
so we had to start over. I mean, it's not unusual to have to start over 3 and 4 times until you figure it out. But that's
Yeah.
not considered a fail. That's just considered a learning experience that makes you better,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you hear a lot of successful people mention that they had a company that went bankrupt or they
Yeah.
experienced bankruptcy. I mean, we've had leaders of our nation that have had that in part of their background, part of their biography. So it's not uncommon to
No,
fail
it would
along the
be
way.
unusual, really unusual to get everything right the first time. That would be
Yeah.
highly, highly unusual.
Yeah.
If you, I'm
Absolutely.
not saying it hasn't been done, but you're going to find out where you're good at and what you're not good at real quick. And what you're not good at, you need to work on it, but you can't lose sight of what you're good at. It's a
Yeah.
balancing act. It's not easy,
Yeah.
but the rewards are great. So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. So bookkeeping, very important, making sure that you have that from day one. And if you don't, you get somebody in there quickly before you get audited. That's what I'm
Yes.
hearing from that.
Oh man,
For-
it's a terrible, terrible position to be in. And the downside is whatever they want to make it. They can take your social
yeah.
security, they can put you in prison. I mean, if they think you're being fraudulent with the numbers, which
Yeah.
we really weren't, we were just uneducated and careless. But to them, if what you reported doesn't match what you put in the bank, we got a major problem here.
Yeah.
They let us go just because we were young and dumb and inexperienced, and they had mercy on us. But they could have turned up the heat and made it really, really ugly, because we
Sure.
put ourselves in that position. So when we started over, that's when it became my company. And
Yep.
from day one, I keep track of every nickel, every dime, every quarter. There's no gray area. I mean, I just pay the taxes and I'm happy to do it because I've
Yep.
been in the situation where I had no defense. And then it's horrible. It's a horrible place to be. And it cost us the business the first time around. So,
Yeah.
and there's so many other things like that you can get wrong that will do you in. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you got to learn quick.
Well, and I feel like some people would take that lesson learned and throw in the towel. So how do you recover from something like that and move forward with determination?
I tell you what, with my situation now, really, uh, my dad didn't want any more to be a business owner, to be honest with you, after
Okay.
that, because it was his company 100%. And he
Sure.
was on the carpet to explain why his accounting was so lackadaisical. But I was young, I was in my 20s, and I saw the potential that this company could have. It was doing well, but I was like, if we get, I wanted to get a fax machine, and I
Mhm.
wanted to find a place with a loading dock, and these little things that he wouldn't do because he never had them. He never had to do it. So I saw that this was my best option, which years ago I would have said this is my most risky option. I learned that I can take control of this company. I can make it into something with some fresh ideas and some youth behind it.
Yeah.
Take the principles I learned from an older person. And so then moving forward, I did the exact same thing with my nephew. When he got out of college, I hired him and said, here's what I want you to do. We need tech updates all over the board because I'm 40 years old now. And it's very important. I see a lot of companies that go stale because they're afraid to turn over the control to somebody who has the new ideas, because everything changes so
Mhm.
fast. So,
Yeah.
so I was just young, and you could see the potential at that point that this could be a good ride here.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
So you had that determination as a young individual, and now allowing yourself to see that maybe this isn't as risky as it seemed to begin with. Just got to fix this issue that caused it to fail on the front end. And I also like you made a great point there. As things do change, you have to be willing to change with them and or get someone in there to help you make those changes that you don't know how to do yourself. I think that's a great example of
what?
someone
Yeah.
willing to move with the move with the changes.
And the other risk is you're working by yourself. In my case,
Mhm.
by myself. I didn't have anybody that was going to keep me current on how business was done. And one day a guy came
Yeah.
in and he wanted me to send a quote to his customer on an email on Excel spreadsheet. I didn't know what Excel was, and I didn't know how to send an attachment to an email. And he looked at me, he's older than me. He looked at me like, man, you are falling behind. You know,
Yep.
you don't know any of this stuff because you're doing things the way you did 5 and 6 years ago. Well, it's changed. There's a lot of new tools that I had totally lost sight of. And that's the other
Yep.
danger of being a small business is there's no program there to keep you current. You got to do it on your own.
Right.
So
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to be willing to ask for that support, get some help
absolutely.
from other people,
Yeah.
and
Whatever it
kind of,
takes. And yeah.
yeah. No, I definitely agree with you on that. Now, so you've been doing that now 30 plus years, we didn't really mention it, but could you clarify a little bit of what type of business is this that you operate?
Sure. We're just technically in the material handling business. The
Okay.
the name of the name of the company is Lockers Unlimited. We started out.
Yep.
My dad was a factory salesman for a metal fabrication company. He started in the factory welding shop desks of all things, and they sold shop desks and storage rack and anything you'd put in the back of the warehouse that's made out of metal.
Yep.
And we took us about 3 or 4 years of trying to sell the entire line to realize that lockers is where we were making our money because people needed expertise in that product, not so much in the others. So once again, we changed focus, went in that direction. Um, and that has kind of once we did that, we started making money. Before that, we were really going in too many different areas, but you don't know that until you get out and try it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That makes sense. You kind of find that niche, that space that you can operate in and be
Exactly.
successful.
And lockers, a metal locker like you had in high school. I mean, it's a crazy little product. People come into my warehouse and they look around and they go, I can't believe you're in this, but this is a crazy thing. Nobody would ever think of this. But there's
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of niche businesses that people don't think about. And,
Yeah.
frankly, that's a good thing, because you
Yeah.
find what it is you're good at, be the expert, and, you can command a higher value at that time.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
willing to pay for
Absolutely.
your expertise.
Yeah. And I've heard it multiple times. There are riches in the niches.
100%. You can't be everything to everybody. You don't want to go there. It never works.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I can definitely, agree with that 100%. I've tried to do that. I
Same
just
here.
even though
Yeah.
over the last year, tried to have multiple, like, 5 things going at the same time, and I was not fully committed to any singular one of them because I couldn't be. So, you do have to find ways that you can narrow your focus, find success,
Yeah.
right?
We didn't know that going in, but we kind of learned it just by looking at where were we making our money, and that's really
Yeah,
how most people who start a business, they pivot at least once or twice before they find the target market that finds value in their offering. You
yep,
don't know that going in, but you figure it out pretty quick or else you don't survive, unfortunately.
right, right, absolutely. Now, you experienced some opportunity to help train and educate other individuals and specific individuals that not everybody's thinking about, helping learn entrepreneurship. Love to talk a little bit about your experience, in the prison system, if I'm correct on that, and doing some education in entrepreneurship and how that went and the feedback you got from that.
Oh, thank you. I love to talk about it. Well, when I told you I didn't know how to send attachments to emails or any of that stuff, and I was trying to think, how do I get myself current? What is the best way to do this? And I thought, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go back and I'll get an MBA.
Yeah.
I'm
Hmm.
40-year-olds. I'm in with the 20-year-olds, and I'm the only one in there that runs my own business. I'm an oddity because everybody else is doing what I was going to do: climb that corporate ladder, get that MBA, get a pay increase.
Yep.
I'm just there trying to learn. And there was some undergraduate entrepreneurship courses at the college, and they were like, "Well, you're the only guy we got. Can you go talk to them about these kids want to start a business?" And I said, "Sure." And I loved it because they would ask a question that I could answer, or I'd see a path they were going down that was dangerous. Just based on my mistakes, I could help them not make the same ones. And I decided at that point forward, forget the locker business. I'm going to be a teacher. I love this. This is where I want to be. But nobody would hire me. I was 50 years old. I had zero experience. I'm sending out applications, resumes, begging for jobs. I'm guest speaking at college, doing anything I can think of, getting more degrees, trying to be more legit. And then one day I saw an ad to teach in a minimum security prison, teach entrepreneurship. And all you had to have was some business experience. And I was like, well, I got that. They got to hire me. And
Yep.
so I applied, didn't hear anything back. I applied again in 6 months when I saw the same ad. And this time I wrote in where it said, what's your teaching philosophy? before I said all the flowery stuff, engage the learner, make it relevant. This time I said, there's absolutely no reason for you not to hire me for this job, all caps, send it off. And I was
Mhm.
like, well, that'll get their attention, but they're going to hate it. Next day they called and said, hey, when can you come to the prison for an interview? So there I was, running around a prison with a bunch of scary looking guys. They showed me where I was going to be teaching. It's this dingy little day room that you would never consider to be a learning space. I didn't have internet access. Internet's not allowed in prison. They wouldn't let me give out anything but a pencil and a piece of paper. And I had a 99-hour class that they didn't have any material for. And
Okay.
anybody in their right mind would have said, no, thank you. I'm going back home. This is not for me. But I knew it was this or nothing.
Yep.
So I really think I was led there. And I think I had to wait those 7 years so I wouldn't turn it down. Because once I got in
Yeah.
there, I realized there's a lot of really sharp people in here with a lot of potential that maybe had a bad role model, or maybe just didn't get the education, or maybe just made a really bad decision, or maybe they just had one really bad night. I mean,
Yep.
but the system paints them all to be the same losers. They dress the same. They get no special treatment. They're
Mm.
dehumanized to the point of they're called by numbers. So I think I was a breath of fresh air to them. And I saw that they weren't getting any help at all. So for me to take the guys that really had the ability to do it and just give them a little bit of advice and a little confidence, I was like
Yep.
the best job I ever had in my whole life. And I got to do it for about 3 years. I hired a few guys to come work at my company from there who have done amazingly well. I know about a handful of guys that are running successful businesses from there.
Yep.
And it's been probably the most rewarding thing I ever did. And whether or not I had a big hand in anybody's success, I don't know. But hey, it was a lot of fun to meet them and maybe give them a little bit of guidance when they needed it.
Yeah.
And so it's something I wouldn't trade anything for. And I saw
Yeah.
myself in them because I did a lot of dumb things. We all do stupid things when we're young.
Yep.
I just didn't get caught, or I came from, white middle class family where when I got in trouble, the police took me to my parents' house and said, you better deal with this
Deal
kid.
with
He's
it.
trouble. Now, if
Mhm.
I came from the wrong side of the tracks, they're taking me to juvenile hall and my incarceration starts there.
Yep.
So I realized the system was in no way fair for people of color, low income people, and uneducated people. They just warehouse them. That's it.
Yeah.
We're not trying to help anybody, which is to me a tremendous waste of human potential. You know,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
there's two guys that I met in prison. Some that were very happy to just keep getting in, getting
Mhm.
out, coming back, and they're going to do that for the rest of their life, and that's good with them.
Yep.
And there were some that never wanted to come back to prison again, and those are the guys that you can isolate and help
Mhm.
and change their lives, or at least try.
Yeah. No, I'm certain that your impact on them, you won't even be able to really know what that level of impact was with the individuals that you were able to provide that education for during that time. And it's really cool to see that you were able to bring some into your business and then also see others start successful businesses after they left the system. And I think I might have mentioned it to you, but I had a sibling who was in the prison system for a period of time, heavily addicted to drugs, of course, had to get sober while in prison, but got into fitness, found a niche that he really could become passionate about, and now is a successful personal trainer operating a business. I think it's
Oh, that's awesome.
inspiring. Yeah, it's really something that I think is good when somebody can pour into people that others are only seeing the negative side of. So,
And I was one of them until I got in there
yeah,
and actually met the individual people. I was like, oh, if you've got a felony, you're a lost cause. There's
sure.
nothing we can do for you. But once you get in there and they're not the same, then you realize there are some people here that are going to do really well if they get a little help. That's awesome about your brother, though,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that was one thing I really try to get people into, because but most of these guys are just lifting weights all day anyway,
yeah,
and they're
sure.
huge. It's like they get
Yeah,
into the fitness, and I was like, and you could be a trainer, you could start your own little gym.
yeah,
There's all kind of things you could do with what, as much as you know about this.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome. I
absolutely.
love that story,
Yeah,
though, because I mean, basically we all make mistakes,
yeah,
and
yeah,
we shouldn't
absolutely.
be treated for the rest of our lives for one mistake. I don't care what it is, and the drug thing is, I mean, you look at the statistics, the majority of people are in prison for
Yeah,
drug problems,
sure.
which
Yep.
maybe led to them stealing or whatever, or selling drugs or whatever. But I mean, that's something that, you should be able to put that behind you and move forward.
Yeah,
But
yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree, and I think sometimes too, having a felony can prevent people from getting a job even after they're out of prison, so that does sometimes cause getting that cycle of going into something that you're gonna end up getting caught doing and then getting back into the system. But being able to start a business where if it's as long as it's in an industry that doesn't require that background check, you're the person looking at your own integrity and your own work ethic, and you're the person that then gets to drive that ship forward. So I think it's a great opportunity when you can find that niche.
you're 100% right. And what I always told the guys was, look, if you're providing value to my life, I don't
Mhm.
care where you came from. It would be very
Yeah,
rude for me to say, hey, did you ever go to prison? I mean, that's irrelevant. We don't talk like that. Now, if I'm
yeah,
hiring you, that's a different story. But if
yep,
you're an independent contractor, if you're, providing value, last thing I'm going to say is
yeah,
tell me
yep,
about your worst night. It's none of my business.
yep,
So it does take the felony out of the picture, which really does hold people back. I mean, it limits you
yeah.
to pretty menial jobs typically.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Now we hit on it briefly a little bit, but the the thing that really helps to make an individual entrepreneur successful, that determination. Love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on that aspect that really helps to ensure that an entrepreneur can become successful.
I learned it, like most things in my life, the hard way. We got into a point where I made a lot of, and I see this happen with so many businesses. We had some
Mhm.
good years, 2 or 3 good years,
Yep.
and I figured it was onward and upward from here on out. And so I went and
Yep.
signed a big 5-year lease on a huge space, brought in people, spent all this overhead, and all of a sudden somebody came along and pulled the rug out from under us,
Mm.
took away basically our whole customer base, and it was time for the exit music, I thought.
Mhm.
And I went to my partner, my best friend from 8th grade, who helped me build the business, and I said, "Man, we're sinking. I can't even pay the rent anymore, and if I don't make this rent payment, they're going to come take my house.
Mm.
I really don't want to lose my house over this. Let's right now we can get a little bit of money for this. Let's just sell it and move forward." And he said, "What are you talking about? You're going to quit?" And I said, "Yeah, we're quitting. This is the only smart move at this point." And he
Yeah.
told me, he said, "Look, I'm not quitting." He said, "Why don't you just go out and get some more customers? You're good at that. Why do you have this negative thing?" And I said, "Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to go one more round with you just out of loyalty because you're my friend. But
Mhm.
I think we're going to go down in flames." But I did. I went out and I found 2 or 3 really good customers where the competition couldn't get to them. And
Mhm.
then it all turned around. And all of a sudden we're hitting new highs that we've never hit
Mhm.
before. And the company's on a major roll. And I look back on that and I think, what would my life have been like if I had quit? And I was gonna. There was only did it for all the wrong reasons, really. Um, and I think that's the key to people who make it in this world and don't. When the chips are all down and it looks like this is it, you just got to keep pushing and get through that last barrier. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, it seems like all the doors open up. It's almost like you're being tested. That was one
Yep.
example. But then the people that I've met that are successful, they're not always the smartest person, the most schooled person, maybe not even the hardest working person. They just decided this was what they wanted in life and they were going to get it. And that's
Mhm.
why when it took me 7 years of trying to get credentials to teach, I was just going to keep going. I wasn't going to quit. By then I learned my lesson. If you want something, you just keep going till you get it or you die first. And there's
Mhm.
no, and I see that with successful people and they all have stories similar to mine where they were tested and thought, this was the end, but pushed through just another day, just another month, just another quarter,
Yeah.
and things turned around. And I really think if you've got that, you'll get there
Yeah.
somehow. You will get there somehow. You don't know how, but the day you quit is the day that all the music stops.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's a very, very good point. I mean, this is a culture that really runs on fast pace, fast pace, fast results, and on demand, and I want it now, and ship it to me tomorrow. And sometimes it's easy to think this isn't working. I gotta stop. I gotta quit. I gotta exit. When the timeline is going to take longer, 7 years, just like you said,
yeah,
and talked with others that it took 25 years till
yeah,
they got to that point of which they felt like now they know which levers to pull in the business to be able to see it grow and to have that positive income continuously build. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. Determination is a key ingredient.
to me. Yeah. And that's just my lesson in life was if, the times I quit on things, anything that I have right now that's worth having was a
Yeah.
challenge to get. And it wasn't easy. It never came easy, but it was always
Yeah.
worth it, and,
Yeah.
and when you quit, you put yourself in a whole different position of, well, now what? I got to start
Yeah.
over somewhere else doing something. It's a bad place.
Yep.
So that's what I've learned in this experience.
Yeah. I think that's a very solid lesson learned.
Right.
Now, you mentioned that, so you did that teaching in the prison setting. Are you doing any teaching anymore?
Yeah, a little bit. A
Yeah.
guy that I teamed up with, I actually brought him into work for me.
Okay.
And he told me one day, I lost my job at the prison. I
Mhm.
was connecting too much with the inmates. They don't like that. I was
Uh,
getting too
okay.
friendly and too formal. And I was
Yep.
trying to help them too much. And the system, and I'm not blaming the system. If you want to run an orderly prison, you dehumanize everybody. You don't have any
Yep.
special treatment. Nobody gets a favor. I mean, I get it. That works.
Yep.
But if you're trying to help them, and I want to convince you that you can run a business, well, I better build your confidence up a little bit, or you're
Yep.
never going to get there. So we're in
Yep.
opposite camps. The day came, I knew it would, where they just let me go, and I was looking for a way to get back, maybe not in prison, but to teach that type of demographic. And I met a guy, and we teach together classes for various nonprofits, and it's all
Yep.
about financial literacy and entrepreneurship. Because what I learned in teaching the entrepreneurship was, even though I think like 80% of people are in prison for money reasons, very few had any financial literacy whatsoever. I mean, we had to start
Sure.
with what's a debit card? How do I get a checking account? And to me, if you can't handle your personal money, running a business is going to be almost impossible. And so we start
Yeah.
with that foundation of, save money, put it away, learn how money works, and then we're going to bring you into entrepreneurship. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. But yeah, I've got a great guy I'm working with,
Yeah.
and we're having a lot of fun.
I love
I'm
that.
not limited by the prison constraints anymore. So
Yep. Yep. Still serving people in the work that you're doing now. I love it. Now I'm going to ask you a
it's a blessing.
question that I always ask my guests. If you were to be handed $1 million today, no restrictions to that, how would you invest that in your business or another endeavor, and why?
It's a great question, because as a younger man, that $1 million, I would have known exactly what to do with, and I would have kept it all for myself. But you get to a certain point where the money's great, but a
Mm.
little bit of money isn't going to get you anything you don't already have that you
Yeah.
want. $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but you could take some of that money. I would take all of it, and I would take the course that I built in prison, and I would launch it as best I could nationwide.
Mhm.
Because even if I only help, let's say I used to have a class, I get 10 people, and I would hope to get 2 or maybe even 3 if I was having a really good class where
Yeah.
these guys could step up, and I thought maybe they had a chance at this. But I'm only helping 3 guys, but I'm changing their future so they don't come back to prison, which changes the future of their children, who now don't have a father or mother in prison. Now he's
Mhm.
supporting them instead of them supporting him. So the
Yep.
downside is just huge. Even if you're only handling a handful, helping a handful, it branches out, and their families all change, and the dynamics change, and it becomes a very powerful thing. So if I could do that, I would do it in a minute, because
Yeah.
I've seen it be successful. And I'm only did it on a small scale, one little prison for 3 years. If this were to
Yep.
get traction, there's no telling.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a great use of funds, and I like how you differentiated between when I was a younger man and
Oh yeah,
presently. I mean, you definitely, your perspective shifts over time, and so
it
I think that's
does.
great.
And helping
Love it.
people is where you want to be as you get older, and you
Yeah.
think of the people that helped you along the way, and it's a way of giving back. And when you see results, you see these people grow and
Yeah.
prosper and build these lives that, it's wonderful. It just
Yeah.
gives you a good feeling that maybe you were a small part of it, or maybe you just got to watch it happen. But if, for whatever reason, they went from a bad place to a really good place,
Yeah.
and that's
Absolutely.
time and money well spent.
Absolutely.
So,
I look over your shoulder and I see a book facing us.
oh,
I just want to
a little
ask about that
subtle.
before before we go. We gotta hear a little bit about that.
I appreciate that, Zach. I really do. Well, I never wanted to teach in prison, and I never really wanted to
Mhm.
write a book either. But when they let me go, I went to my dad's wife and I said, "Well, I don't have any more good prison stories for you because I don't work there anymore." And
Sure.
she said, "Well, you should write a book about it." And as soon as
Hmm.
she said it, I was like, "Oh, I really should. I'll never have time though. This will never happen." And then COVID hit, and
Yep.
we're all quarantined for. I did all the household projects I could think of that I
Hmm.
was saving for retirement. And I'm looking at this time. There doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And one day I just sat down and I said, I'm going to write a book about teaching in prison, and let's see where that goes.
Mhm.
Because, what I want to do is take the reader through the fence with me the first day and be like, oh my gosh, what am I doing in here? These guys look like they're going to jump me. I don't want to be here. This is scary. To the friends I made, the people that grew from whatever I could do to help them. And I want them to read it and think, if I meet a guy with a felony, maybe he's not as bad as I think. Maybe I should give him a second chance. So it's kind of a way of spreading the message. I'm not trying to sell the book. If anybody wants to go to our website and would like a copy, I'll be happy to send it at no cost, my expense. Just mention Freedom Fighter Podcast or Zach, and give me an address, and I'll have one headed your way.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Now, if anybody does want to reach out to you, whether about the book or just find out a little bit more about what you do, what's the best way for someone to connect with you?
Thank you. The name of the book is Lifeline to a Soul. And the reason I named it that, somebody asked me one time, what's it like to teach in prison? And I said, well, it's like throwing a lifeline to a drowning man. The problem is he doesn't know he's drowning necessarily. So if you can get him to grab that rope and maybe listen to what you're saying and maybe start pulling himself out of this bad place, then this is all worth doing. So it's lifelinetoasoul.com, and there's a place at the bottom to put your email address. I'll get back to you. Send me an address. Love to send it. Anybody who'd want one a book, just mention your podcast, and we're happy to do it.
Perfect. I love that. I appreciate it, John. I appreciate your time today. It's been a great conversation. And I do encourage people to reach out to get a copy of that book, because your perspective may change. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to be involved in some capacity in your community as well. Thank you again,
thank you,
John.
Zach. It's been a lot of fun. I look forward to hearing all your other podcasts too, as much as this one.